Just talk about that a little bit. So the overall goals, right, is essentially to develop and source warm leads, and then also to like develop a collection of mentors and helpers. Obviously, this, they both will kind of take time. This is a more like immediate, sometimes trial and error, whereas this one, some you may already have existing and built in, and then we expect that it will take some time to build up to this, right? The other thing to note is, like, people, very few people are born like pretty natural at this, but rather like people in this class might have different levels of experience in it, just like anything else, right? So like for me, I just switched careers a lot of times, so I had to do that every time I broke into a new career on one level or another. But I was not very good at it, like initially at all. So that's kind of, so I think the point of saying that is like this is a skill set we expect, like, and we don't expect everyone to be good at it right away. It's just that as long as you're making an effort and responding and being accepting of like the career coach and our feedback, I think that's fine. You don't have to be great at it, but developing some skill can like really help. So what do we mean by like developing mentors? Like the whole point is, for mentors are like, these are individuals who you can maybe ask like every like 6 weeks or even maybe more often for advice. So these are people you can like check in and feel comfortable like checking in on for, say, like as you develop your project, your skill set, your career search, right? And these are like deeper connections, and it may take some time to develop those deeper connections. But like that's kind of the goal is if you have, say, 5 people or even better, like 10 people would be amazing, that you can set up monthly meetings with online. Like that's really useful. Right? Because what they can do is, one, they'll give you good guidance and bring you deeper into their world, and then two, like they may be a source of warm leads eventually. So that's what we're talking. That's Chen did this diagram that we want to like kind of. What they're doing is they're bringing you more into their world. So as you like go deeper in finding this, right, like you can expect good results. Helpers are those who maybe you'll check in a little bit less often with, but they know who you are, they remember your skills and your interests, right? That's why like having down an elevator pitch and like knowing what you're interested in when asked is really valuable. So like this could be quarterly, like, and I've done this before where like I said, especially when I was like starting out as an entrepreneur, like if I meet someone who this was a pretty helpful conversation, would you mind if we like check in every few months? People will generally say yes to that, right? As long as it was a pretty good conversation. And so you just, you set a calendar invite right there for a few months from now, and then you check in then, right? And then same thing, like there are people that, as you have specific questions, maybe you shoot them an email or a LinkedIn message and ask them, right? So, I've used this for both like getting jobs, but then also honestly for like sourcing employees, right? So that's why it's valuable. Is like lots of times these are going to be like people I've known previously, and then like just to kind of jog some ideas. This may be like a former boss. Just these are existing mentors or helpers, like someone from your internship, either an engineer or manager, family member, friend, friends of family, that type of thing. Former classmates, right? A lot of you have gone to previous schooling, so some of those people may be may be really helpful and might be engineers or in like a data field. All right. One thing just to note is like there's going to be, for any of this stuff, it's going to be a bit of a funnel, right? So like you might ask people that like you haven't spoken to a couple years, and then that connection is effectively cold, and that just happens to everyone. So just try not to take that personally. It doesn't matter how. Like happens to me all the time. Happens to my brother's like a very senior engineer. Happens to him all the time. Okay, so this is one thing, is like kind of one track is developing this group of like warm leads, collection of mentors. One thing I should mention, by the way, is like people told this to me in law school, right? Like, I went to, like a good law school. Like, these are very accomplished people, and like the professors, like one of the best pieces of advice was like, build like a personal board of directors. And the reason why is, a lot of people ended up kind of not having control of their careers because it's hard to do this. So this is just like a very good skill, kind of regardless of like kind of your professional background or like your anything on your resume. It doesn't really matter. Like just to give another, like my sister, like she was in academia for like the first 10 years of her life, and then moving into like a non-academic role just takes a different, takes this type of work, and you're kind of starting from scratch and doing it. So some of you have already like have had to do this before, but some of you just simply haven't, and it may feel a little bit less comfortable. So then the second thing, right, so that's that first kind of pillar. The second one is like sourcing warm leads. So one, like obviously these can come from your like mentors and helpers, and you want to be like handle that the right way, right? So you can ask your mentors and helpers, like if you find a role, I was thinking about applying for this. Do you think that this might be a match for me, right? As opposed to like directly saying like, can you give me a referral, right? Because that's like putting people too on the spot. But do you think this can be a match for me, right? And they say, yeah, like definitely. You're like, okay, great. Is there someone in particular I can send my resume to, etc., right? So at that point, you're getting the yes and moving forward. Individuals posting on Slack, individuals, right, and then sending, following through if you see a good role with something on LinkedIn. All right. So one thing like I put in here, and that kind of a lot of career counselors will say is like you earn a warm lead. All right. So just messaging someone like, hey, I applied, can you refer me, or something along those lines. Hey, just to let you know I applied. That's not going to be helpful, right? Unless like they already are like a close mentor or somebody that really knows you. That's just not going to be helpful. So it's either you've already developed that relationship or have that relationship, or if it's somebody you haven't met before but they post in the Slack community, right, you need to explain, and we've talked about this before, but just to reiterate it, you need to really do some research beforehand and explain your particular fit and your interest in it, okay? So again, like, just messaging them is not going to be effective. So like crafting a message where you think about what's particular about the job application, what you see in the job description, about their company, about like maybe the culture or the engineering team, right? We talk about different ways to research this, and then matching that with your particular background, right? You really want to just take advantage of all those points of overlap as much as possible. And the reason why I bring this up is like we see mixed results in doing that. Like as like the career coaches have been like talking, we've seen like some people are doing this well and have gotten really good results, and then like for some people this is like a totally new skill set. So like we need to develop that skill. So I put in like kind of some scripts here, and then I just kind of say this, like the more customized the message you write in general, typically the better the results. And then, at the very end, I just say like, hey, like start thinking about this. Like on Thursday, we can ask you to submit some. It's honestly just good for you to have a list of people that you can start developing this with. All right. And this is, honestly, like this is the most, not only is this like effective for like breaking in, it can also like help you like leap to get a job that otherwise you just wouldn't. You wouldn't get. So that's what I recommend. All right, so we wanted to review this, so we'll deploy this as a reading. The next things that I wanted to talk about is like just go back through like finding a network and then writing the message, and then in the next class what we can go through is like how to develop a connection, right? How to do in-person networking, how to do networking online, meaning like networking on Slack, how to like have an informational meeting, and then conferences and career fairs. All right, so like just to give you an idea, because I feel like actually in general, almost everyone in the class is very warm to, like is very open to taking this approach, but sometimes you just haven't done it before, right? So it's like, how exactly do I do this, right? So that's what we're trying to be like very tactical, provide a lot of tactics in how to do this. But like for just like what I covered right now, does it feel like, any questions or comments about this? Does this feel like a good approach for some of you who have done it? So have some of you guys done this? It seems like you probably have. Anyone want to share? Okay, good talk. So, all right, finding a network. Okay, so then, how, like, I just wanted to provide like more structure about how to find a network, because we have a lot of resources, but just to organize this a little bit more. So the first thing, and on it, like, the other thing to note is, right, like, this is what I've had to do now, like, the past few months, and so I'm part of this is from, my personal experience, from like kind of sourcing internships and things like that, and sourcing job opportunities. So I read a lot of things, but then I'm also just, from my own results, trying to provide that advice. So what's been like very successful for me, and I know this can depend on like just, whether or not my family is in like tech, and my sister comes from a science background. So getting, talking to them has been very helpful. And the reason why, and honestly, I forgot to do that. Like, it's easy to be like, I'll get to that, or, whatever. But this is, it's very helpful, right? Because not only, like, are they more willing just to like think deeply about it, right? And they're also willing to tap their existing network, but they simply aren't going to do this, like, if you don't ask, right? So like thinking about like even just your immediate family, cousins or aunts or uncles, or like it's pretty rare for me to like I'd have to think about it to like ask my aunt or uncle, but it could be the case that if they work for like a Fortune 500 company or just like an organization that has an engineering team, they might know somebody, and right, they might know somebody in the engineering that is willing to talk to you and what you're getting to is like getting to that either a warm lead or to that helper or mentor, right? So even if there's not, an actual opening, having someone that can talk to you and just give some advice is really helpful, right? Because then later down the line that might open up, and there you have that warm lead, or they just link you to somebody else. All right, so I would start here. The other thing is, hopefully you don't feel too uncomfortable, right, asking your family members or close friends. But literally, like, your closest friends, like if you think of like your 3 closest friends, some of them might be helpful, or like people you've seen in the last month, right? In-person networking, we've been getting some questions about this because, like some people, you might have never gone to a meetup before, right? So it just might feel, or maybe you've gone to a meetup but not one for tech. The goal is not to meet as many people as possible in these things. That can kind of like, could potentially like put people off if it feels like too transactional and you're like, I gotta meet this other person, right? And I've been to like particularly like business school meetups that really feel like that, and that's like, that doesn't feel good at all. So instead, what you're trying to do, if you can just walk away with like one actual like connection that ends up being like a helper or a mentor later on, that's actually pretty good. To get there, that means that you probably need, maybe like 3 to 5 LinkedIn's, and then you'll send some follow-up messages, and like one of those individuals, and you'll feel it lots of times, may be like a good match. All right, it's just like your interests align. You see how you can help each other. He sees how he or she sees how they can help you, and you follow up, and then you ask, hey, do you mind? I'd love just to talk to you for a little bit. I really think I can gain a lot from that conversation. If not, I really appreciate it. So one thing to note is like the ask can come, and we talk about this later, but the ask, like you asking for like, a follow-up, that can come, or like a meeting, that can come in the LinkedIn message later, if you feel uncomfortable asking for it, in person. And then, just one thing to note is the reason why this can be so useful is, right, a first round interview is almost always behavioral. So like going to in-person events, if you're talking to a hiring manager, it can be a proxy for that lots of times. They're like, this is somebody who definitely would pass the behavioral interview. And then one thing just to point out is like this is tech and non-tech events, right? So social gatherings, cultural networking events. Like some of your cities may not have a large tech scene, but that doesn't mean then there might be other kind of events where you can kind of meet some people and just say that you're on the job market and you just finished this course and blah blah blah, right? So these can be these honestly, I've seen these found some these to sometimes be very good because you might meet people who are looking for engineers, but they are not deep into the engineering community, right? So meeting an engineer that's looking for a job or is asking for help is less common than typical. So how do you do this? Like meetup.com, Luma. So for instance, just type in like New York City October for October events site Luma, right? It's not an excellent search interface. And then the other thing I do is I'm always asking ChatGPT, like what are some good whatever communities in whatever city, in whatever kind of field. And like it's 2 years old, so some of these might have gone stale, but you probably will get like one or two that are pretty good. See if you're in the existing Slack channels, browse the channel and see if your city is listed as an existing channel, because that's a great source of just finding people that might want to get coffee or whatever. And then this is really useful. Like, so I'm going to various conferences, and the way that I basically do this, there's two ways. One is searching this dev events conferences, and look for ones that are in your city, right? Especially if they're relatively cheap, try to go. The conferences are extremely useful because they have booths set up of people that are looking to hire, right? So not only are they like events designed for networking just in general, like you sit next to random people at lunch or going to these talks or whatever, but then then you just walk around the booths and introduce yourself and say, hey, tell me about the company, cool, like tell me a little bit more about the engineering team, and that's about it, and then you get their LinkedIn. And then alumni group, right? Like see if you're in a, if like San Diego, like I looked at like my school's alumni to see do they have a local chapter, right? So look to see like does your group have a local chapter? Are there events, right? And you can start going to them. So I do recommend these. Sometimes you may feel like more comfortable at like events where you're doing something else. So like Code for America is very good for that, right? Because you're coding, and you get to just hang out for like a couple hours, and then just like general volunteer events. One of my students like just kept going to playing tennis in Brooklyn and like met tons of people. But I mean that's not going to apply to everyone. But like bouldering, hiking meetups, right? Blah blah. This is going to be hit or miss. But these types of things like cultural community centers and events, right? Like people can be really willing to help at those types of things. And then same thing, like think of your previous career communities. It like healthcare, finance. It could be like purely healthcare or finance or whatever related, and they may be hiring people. And then the other thing is, right, obviously career fairs are super helpful, and it doesn't have to be a tech career fair. It could be in a different field and still be very helpful. All right, the online networking, we talked about these. NYC intros, I feel like people can use more of that. We saw that Lunch Club could be a hit or miss, but one thing to try is like try a different account if you feel like your account has gone stale, because it has been successful for other students. But if it's a miss, then there's enough ideas here for you to identify a few of them. And then, like for the Slack channels, just like sometimes you only need a few of them to find ones that are like really good sources. So that's what I found. There's like a few that I like one or two in particular that I find like very helpful. Online events, and then speaker events. And here you can just follow up with the speaker afterwards. People have done that with me when I speak at things. Online conferences are great because they're often free or maybe less than $100. You don't have to travel anywhere, pay for a hotel, and they have breakout rooms. And I've gotten people jobs that way by just being in the breakout room, talking to a hiring manager, suggesting a student. All right, so there's these are very good ones. And then for less close ties, what I mean by this is, specifically like LinkedIn, right? Like people that aren't really in your network or LinkedIn, or maybe like you haven't spoken to them in forever, or they're a friend of a friend, or for someone in your alumni network. You just have to be very specific. Like just to say like I graduated from a data engineering camp, can we talk? Probably isn't enough. You want to look for, right, data and finance, data and climate change, data and whatever the area, the city you're living in. Say if it's not like a tech hub in particular. And what I would do, like, and what I've done before, is just literally like click through your LinkedIn contacts and write down people that would be good to talk to, and then just message them. But you need to have that like particularized like message, And some of them are not going to respond, and it even hurts me when they don't respond. But like that, it's just some of them do, and it really pays off. Your alumni network, Slack communities, etc. Okay, and then I have a couple resources. For about like half of you are in healthcare. I created a list of healthcare communities. This in particular is $20 per month, but I think it might be like my favorite. I'm sorry for those of you not in healthcare, but this is probably like my most friendly Slack. So even if you're not in healthcare, maybe you want to join, you can think about it. But if you are, I definitely think this is worth it. All right. And I think like the idea here, what I'm trying to do is kind of give you a range of options, right? You have both like one-on-one stuff, like more meetup stuff, and then, kind of like these like cold, like just reaching out to people. But like each of these can be effective, and you might feel more or less comfortable at various of them. And you just want to be experimental with it. Does it feel okay? We good? Okay. Good to know. Next thing. Okay, let's go through this again, because I feel like because sometimes like you all have had really good really good overlap, and it just has not come through in the message. So again, never do this on Slack or LinkedIn, right? Instead, like just in a few lines, explain kind of where's the overlap, and then you want to read the description. Like, so if you read this description, like they're mentioning commercially minded analytics engineer, interest in being part of the core development of our data products. Like this is something I'm like highlighting. This feels very generic to me. Maybe not this part, munging data, working with public data sources, right? This is more particular, right? So now it's like you identify a few things, articulate and scrappy, able to wear multiple hats, right? So like that's what you want to highlight. Okay, and then, yeah, same thing, right? Obviously, you can reach out to a person that wrote a blog post, but be specific. Okay. I don't know. Any discussion about this? Any like success stories or horror stories about this you want to share? All right.
I'll share something.
Go for it.
In the networking I've done, in the data engineering mentor, and just the people I've talked to that I don't know very well, like everyone has wanted to help. Like they agree to meet with you and then talk to you, they want to help you. So like to ease that pressure off your mind of going into the meeting or reaching out in the first place, like they want to help, they will help you. And if they don't, that's okay too. People are busy. But that was a big block for me when I first started this. And it's been a lot more pleasant than I expected.
Yeah. In general, I find the tech community more helpful than most other communities, right? So just like someone who came from law, there are like X number of positions, like, right? Like at X number of firms, and that's it. So like people, it is like this prestige. There's only so much prestige in the world, apparently. So like, whereas like tech, like it's a big world, like it's growing, it's always changing, and it's people that are doing it for like because they're passionate about it. So if you're interested, and you're having a skill set, it's like you think you have something to offer. So you're not really doing anyone a disservice. And a lot of people broke in to tech coming from a non-traditional background. All right. Okay. So one kind of like broader thing is like we are basically no longer like I think the 25 applications per month is probably like is at this point like not the best use of your time. Like we'll, now that we're monitoring on Hunter and just seeing the through rate and then seeing the through rate of going through these approaches, like we can wait another week to like be sure, but the early results are just showing like, okay, like maybe it feels good to like send a lot of applications, but it's not as effective as these other approaches. And then I've been watching this guy, Steve Dalton, who did the 2-hour job search. He used to do like career services at Duke's MBA school, and he like one analogy he gave was this like when you see these job applications, you can like see the money in front of you, but you don't realize that there's a glass wall there, and you just keep running into that glass wall, because it's just, and so the chances are just not that high. And before, like I said before, like we used to see that as like the through rate was kind of sufficient enough, but I don't know, like, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen a very high kind of through rate for any of the students here, right? Whereas, regardless of experience, we have seen that with networking, both like getting interviews and getting jobs. And in general, when you guys are on the interviews, you're pretty competitive. Like that's, I mean, you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but like that's what we've seen. All right. So the idea here is like to really give you some specific things, and then like in the next class, you can expect that we're going to like kind of ask for specifics, not to like, not like we're not going to do anything with this information other than like, as in career coaching, to help remind you, okay, this may be a good person to reach back out to, etc. Right? And like, okay, why don't you develop, let's go back to like these communities, or what about this, to make sure that you just have some approaches for doing this. All right? Does that feel all right? Yeah, disappointing, but okay. Any questions or anything? I don't know about this.
I have a question because, like, I think that picture that you had said Shannon created was pretty accurate. That's how I feel like I am right now. Like, I have no problem, not that one above. I feel like there's no problem reaching out to people. I just don't know how to go from that to the next picture. Because, like, I can say hello to people, I can reach out, I can't get to the next steps.
Okay. We can start to talk about that. There's different things, let's talk about a couple different things. So one is, so asking for like, hey, do you mind, so we do have some scripts here. I don't know if it's quite ready for like, for prime time, but maybe it's pretty good. So the first thing, right, is like be genuine. Obviously we talked about that, but we also do have like, kind of some like just specific lines. And again, it's not going to work for everyone. And like every contact can go cold eventually. But you just say like, I'm looking, so if you think of any resources that come to mind, do you mind if I get your LinkedIn? I'd love to reach out sometime, learn more about this. If you're free in the next week or two, it would be great just to catch up, make sure that I'm headed in the right direction. And I'm working on things, and that I'm, kind of working on things that would make me a good candidate. Not every one of your kind of, people that you get in touch with will kind of respond, but like people that are pretty likely to, or okay, people that you have met in person, if you're going to say like an online event, like say like a Code for America, like type of volunteer thing, becoming a regular at places is really useful, so maybe it doesn't happen the first time, or maybe even the second time, but like the third time it feels like kind of a connection, and you kind of, you ask for, like some type of thing, some type of a follow-up meeting. What I typically do at like a networking event is I'll try to send a resource to somebody. So say, hey, it was really nice meeting you. One thing that I had in mind, or one thing I thought about was this might be useful to you. So it might be like something about DBT, or maybe it's something about like a community, and maybe they exchange something back or say thanks. And then from there you might say like, hey, by the way, like, I think that I might get a lot from talking to you. If you have like 20 minutes, or you don't have to say that, but like if you have some time in the next week or two, like that would be helpful. So one thing that we like suggest is, there's a couple things. One is like if you can provide help to the other person, right? It's just natural that they're going to want to feel uncomfortable if they then don't, provide help back, right, when you ask for it. So if there's a way, like when you're networking, to help other people, and that could be, Slack communities, your own resources, like you guys are free to share like a few jigsaw lessons, not everything, but like you want to send like 5-10 lessons, that's fine with me, right? And this applies to in-person and virtual networking. So a lot of them, you'd be surprised, so many of them will not have heard of the MLOps community, the DBT community, a healthcare community. I've built connections so many times by just suggesting these Slacks. Like this one in particular for engineers, right, has a lot of high quality engineers. And like, so providing help is one thing. The other thing is, asking for advice. Ask for like, advice about skills, things about your project, right? And then that can, you can follow up again, right? And say, like, check in a couple weeks or whatever and say like, hey, there are a couple things I've been trying or whatever. Like, if you have like 15 minutes in the next week or if you have some time, I'd appreciate it. Does anyone mind, like some of you guys have been able to like kind of have some repeat meetings? I don't know if there's any like tips that other people have to share or ways that they've transitioned, like kind of meeting someone into somebody who they kind of can come back to a couple times.
I've done that. Nothing fruitful has really come from it, but if the goal is just have a second meeting, I would say just have the first meeting be valuable, something like show interest.
That's every time it's happened to me, it's just been someone that I've gotten along with, and we've had an interesting conversation back and forth where I asked them like questions that were real, thoughtful questions that clearly showed I was interested. And I also, so just have a good conversation that's valuable. It doesn't seem like you're just talking about nothing, and then they might want to see you again.
Yeah, I mean, the more that like I think about it, like people that I've, like, so a good amount of people like that have become internship partners, or people that are just like cold leads on like Lunch Club or like some sort of coffee chat channel. But when we had like a lot of similar interests, right? Like it just clicks. Like it's not, like we kind of said, it's not so common that you meet someone who like overlaps with like multiple interests, and that's why like, if you use your project to get pretty deep into that world and you are interested and you show it, like lots of times they'll be willing to talk with you again. And
But I guess it sounds more like I've gotten there too. I've gotten past the second, and then like I feel like maybe one or two good conversations. I got all the questions out. I got all the things I can give, and then that's about usually where it ends.
At the end, you might say like, "Hey,
I don't know advice to ask."
No. Well, you can just say like, "Hey, this was really useful to me. Do you mind if we do that? If we check back in like 3 months, can we schedule this as like a quarterly?" And I've done that with people, and that's been useful because in 3 months, like you'll have done different things. Like you'll have worked on your project. We'll have gone through like some more resources. Like hopefully you'll like read some books or whatever. Like you'll have gone into like different like community. Like so saying something like that and then just putting a calendar invite for 3 months down the line. I do that. Like and like I've done that because other people have done that for like other people have suggested that for me. They're like, yeah, let's do this as a quarterly. So that's a good way, I would say. And then you just have them in mind to like kind of ping them for a question. You don't want to overuse it, but then also it's the same thing. Like if you can suggest something for them, like that's really nice, right? Like hey, like by the way, I don't know if you've seen this, but blah blah. Right? One thing that I've done, I mean, we'll talk about this with like Slack stuff, like forgetting, I think like a lot of what you guys are talking about is kind of like how to get warm leads. There's been different techniques on Slack for me. I mean, sometimes it is like, right, responding to the job posting and crafting a message. One thing that I found like pretty useful is people that post in the general message, the general channels on Slack, or like, in providing advice or help there. And then like a week or two later, if you see that their company is hiring, right, you can click on the profile, see where they're working, see if their company is hiring, reach out to them. Oftentimes they're like, yeah, I'll help. Like I'll give you a referral. Not always, but like that's happened more than 2 times, and like in the past month. So it's pretty good considering I've only done it and maybe like 3 times. So like things like that, like just providing some help on Slack. And what's good about it is they're not getting pinged 40 times because they just posted, hey, I have this job, and now all these people are messaging them. You still can break through that way, and people have, but okay, they asked for advice, and you actually provided some help, or they just posted in general, hey everyone, I have this background, and then they say, I'm willing to talk, right? I'd love to chat with somebody about X, Y, or Z, and then you respond and do that. That can lead to like a little bit of a back and forth, and then get to like a referral or like some sort of warm lead. All right. Sometimes it's not explicitly like I'll tell the hiring manager, but more like, oh, hey, okay, cool, just to let you know I just applied, and that's kind of as good as you get, but it can help. All right. But yeah, like, the point, what's good about it is actually, like, I think the results are generally better than a normal interview as well, lots of times. Like, for whatever reason, it can, actually breaking through is more likely. If you have, like, a lot of you, basically all of you have, I think all of you have a previous, like, deep skill set to provide, right? So you have that, so providing that and providing that help and finding ways that you can provide that is really, really useful, right? Because you're providing help, and people are going to want to return the favor or feel uncomfortable if they're like, nah, I don't think so. You may just say like, hey, do you think I'm a fit? Again, and they might say that position's a little too senior for you, but maybe this other thing opens up. And we've already seen that with this cohort a couple times. And I've personally gotten that message before. All right. I mean, so it will take some time, but I think that again, we've seen it be pretty successful for people who pursue this consistently, within 3 months. I don't know, that's a pretty good time frame, but it being active, but you have to just kind of keep up with it. And then the other thing is, try to make kind of what William was saying, if it's a genuine connection, right? Doesn't feel transactional. You guys just share interests. But I'd say a key to that is, this is where we talk about the niche and using your project. Your project is a technique to go deep in a particular field, right? And to show that, right? And to also just develop the knowledge, so that you'll find at that point, you'll have real insight that they don't know about. Not everybody and we've already kind of done that with using DuckDB. Just you can research that more and have real deep conversations about it if it's genuinely try to find what makes it interesting to you, and I think that can help. And it will take time. That's why we say kind of it's this 2-track of, if you're developing this and then you're also sourcing warm leads, and then you can go back through some of these people, and if you have 30 people, chances are of them, I would say probably at least 10%, there will be some sort of matching job. It's pretty good. That's not, maybe more, and maybe they know somebody, maybe they have, the other thing you can do is maybe, and people have done this with me, if they find kind of someone they want to talk to, they'll see the mutual connection on LinkedIn and say hey, I saw that you're connected to this person, do you mind providing, do you know them well enough to provide an intro, right? And they may say, actually, I have no idea, I have no idea who that person is, but sometimes they do, all right? Yeah, so anyway, but this is a good start. I feel like everyone, we kind of go through this list. My sense is almost everyone, kind of can benefit by has more ways that they can move to this kind of approach, and we're just kind of showing what's effective. Moving to this approach has gotten results pretty quickly. Getting a job within a few months, or getting multiple interviews 6 weeks in, something like that. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay. I'm sure some of you know more than me, but I think the main thing is to feel like somewhat comfortable, like about what it is, what it can do, and then be able to just go further with it if you end up having an interview that you feel like, okay, this is kind of like an analytics role, or they mention specifically Tableau, right? You'll go a little bit deeper with it. But essentially, you can see we have this data set. This is kind of the main panel. You just click on the Tableau icon at the top right to get there. And then from here, you can really just like drag and drop a data set, like let's say this top movies, into that main panel, right? And then you can see that now I have a connection to top movies, right? And this is like this is like your tab for the various data sources. So you could, put more data sources in here, or like you can see if there's a possibility of like joining table. You can kind of see it's showing you that diagram. But for right now, we have one data source that we're working with. And you can see that it has, here it shows you the different fields, right, the names, and then it's also pretty good at identifying the data type as well. All right, so the pound is for number, obviously. The ABC is for text. Okay. The other thing it's doing is kind of like a panda's head type of operation, where it's showing you, the rows right here. Okay. So this is like in this connections tab or this data source tab. From there, you can try to like build some graphs with it. So for that, we can go to a sheet. You can see that you can create new worksheets here. Actually, let's do that. Let's create a new worksheet. Okay, so just create a new worksheet, sheet 4. We can, it's just like Excel. You can give it a name. So let's call this like movies spreadsheet earnings. Okay, and then over to the left here, these are like these are the fields that you'll be working with, right? So notice that it's organized in, they call this normally it's, so most of these are dimensions, right? Meaning they're text, non-numeric fields, like categorical essentially. And then we have I forget. Then we have the other set of fields, right, which are just like numerical, like the target type of things, right? But it's naturally dividing things up to you by whether they're text or like categorical. So even though year is typically a number, right? It's a number. It's still discrete, right? It's not going to be, 1991, 1992, right? It's discrete values. So it feels categorical. These are continuous variables, right? If you talk in terms of statistics. So, okay. So now you kind of like separate things by like rows and columns. We try to build a graph here. So let's say we want to see the earnings of different genres. Let's try this. So here you can see all the listings. It's going to build out these genres. And then let's also do the income. All right. So now we can see that this is, all the earnings of action, adventure, whatever, and then, animation, the drama movies, etc. Notice by default it is aggregating these, right? So these are listings of a lot of movies. If you go back to this, and then what it's doing is it's grouping them and then summing it. You can change that. So one, if we want this chart to go horizontal, we can like use this to transpose it, right? The other thing you can do is just make this the column, meaning that the income is now going like on the x-axis, and then the genre is now up and down on the y-axis. All right. Other things, we can change the metric. So if I like double click on this, this kind of works like Excel if you're familiar with it. So this is the attribute that I am using, and then the aggregate measure, like we can change it to average if we want. Okay. So here we have the average amount. What you may want to do from here is sort the data. So for this, the way that I generally do that is click on the axis, like hover over the axis, and then you can you can see this has a down arrow, right? So this will now sort by the average income. Okay, and I believe I can reverse it. So now it's lowest to highest. Okay, and I think that third one stopped sorting it. So this is now highest to lowest. If I decide I want to sort by this column, right, I can click on this. And then I think there's probably another way. I don't remember, worksheet, and maybe analysis. I can't really see it. Oh, yeah, I can't really see it. But anyway, that's how you can sort it. And I know there's another way, but I just forget. So anyway, so here's a way that we can like sort the data, changing the metric. You can also create like a calculated field. So for example, here we're doing the average income, but let's say we have the income and then we also have the budget, right? So I can right click here and now click on create a calculated field and then kind of specify this calculation as maybe the profit, all right? And now this will be the income minus the budget, okay? And then I just click and it says the calculation is good. I gave it a name. I click OK here, and now notice that now I have a new field over to the left. So if I want to, I could even potentially, let's say, drag this. This will be, I think, a side-by-side type of thing. So this shows me the average income, and this shows me the average profit, and that's, so I guess it does make sense. These things are making a lot of money. Right, and you know, so then you can choose, I guess, what you want to sort by. All right. So what I did here was, oh, let's do the average profit. That's why it's looking weird. The average profit, so that should be less than the income. Okay. And you know, again, like we can transpose this if you want to do it this way. So this is the average income, and then down here we can see the average profit of these. So the way that I did that was I right-clicked over to here on the field, and then I did create a calculated field, okay? And then from there, you can kind of put in the calculation. Like maybe you want to do it in thousands. So you take, you know, the income, do the square brackets, the income, and you divide by like 1,000, right? And then it's income in thousands or something like that. And then you can just use that calculated field by dragging it over here, all right? Other things, you can do like, you can annotate this. So a way to do an annotation, let's say you want to annotate this specific component, like this specific mark right here. I can right click on this and then go to annotate, right? And then I can annotate like the mark or the point, let's say this mark. And then here's kind of like it's what it's doing by default, genre, average profit, but we could kind of add our own and say like action movies had the highest income, right? And put that here. And then you can always click on this and like drag it around if you want to, right? So if you want to annotate like a specific point, you can do that. And then you can add in, right? Like, I think, is it like this? The actual, I knew I was going to mess it up. I knew I shouldn't have tried it. You can add in the actual income. Let's try one more annotation and we'll show us how. Do right click, annotate the mark. So it'll be like average parentheses profit. So we'll say this had the second highest average profit, something like that. Let's see if that did it. There you go. You can add some text or whatever, but right this way you're using the variable, whatever this value is, it will just be placed in here. All right, so that's how we can do some annotations. For the axes, you can double click on an axis and then edit it. All right, so this is useful, like say you want to, you know, change like the title of the axis, you can do that. average income by genre, something like that. Right, you can see that automatically updates to my incorrect spelling. And that's pretty good. Right, so what we covered so far is essentially, we started with a data source. We just literally, from Tableau, took the CSV file, dropped it in here. That brought us to our data sources. If I know how to go there, it's probably this text file. Nope, I'm so bad at this. Let's click on this. Okay, there we go. So I just clicked on this, and that took me to the data source. Then from here, I can click on the sheet, right? Create a new sheet if I want to, or just use a blank one that maybe is existing. And now, right, we already will start with these fields, and by default, right, we saw Tableau is going to group our fields. So generally, you can have like, a measure, that's what it's called, a measure, which is the numeric values, and then also kind of divide it up by a dimension, and then it will automatically perform a group by for you. You can change the kind of chart. So here I'm doing automatic, but I can say change it to like a line chart, right, if I wanted to. And now this is, you can see that's now a line chart. Certain charts obviously are going to work different than others, but you can specify that as well. And then we saw, you can annotate specific parts. You can annotate a region by going to annotate the area. So if you want to say like genre, like, I don't know, decreasing or whatever, or like say something more generic, you can just do annotate an area. Another thing, I guess, to show you is that you can filter the data. So let's say that we only want categories that had like a profit over a certain amount. I think what I would do is, see this filter area? Let's drag that here, and then so this is for the field of profit, and let's say the average profit, and it broke. Let's do a different one. Let's try the average income and do that as a filter, and let's say the average will let me do that. Oh, you jerk. Let's try moving it over here. So the average income, I'm going to move this as a filter. Let's see if I do average. Oh, there we go. And let's see what happens here. So now click OK. If you look, it did not happen the way I expected. Normally what I think is that you then see a little kind of slide bar over here that will allow you to kind of like limit or say only if the profit is greater than. Let's click on filters this way. Format. Does anyone know what I'm doing wrong here? Anyone that knows filters better than me? Sorry about that, gang. You may have to go to the reading for this. So what I was trying to do is like create this filter. Let's try it one more time. Format filter and set control. Alignment left. Oh, is it? Let's say alignment right. Let's go back. Sorry. Yeah, and I just don't see it. I apologize. But we got close.
So definitely, just double click that average income. Like down below, like you can drag the. You can drag those points.
Oh, do this? Yeah, so I guess that will work. Like we can say the range of values from here to here, or say at least. Normally I was able to create like a dynamic filter where it would be over on the right side here, and then you can kind of like specify, like you can dynamically change this. But, this works too. So we'll say like the range is basically down to the lowest to, actually let's do the highest, but we'll exclude some of these. So it has to be at least this amount. And now you see that we're kind of like filtering based on that. Can we move this? It didn't work. Yeah, so I'm unable to do the dynamic filter. But that gives you an idea, right? So you can double click on this and then specify the filter here, right? With the range, or you can say like at least, right? So now you just get to alter this one. Okay. That's kind of it. It's the main things. We can, make this bigger or smaller, things like that. Those are the main things. The one other tricky thing is just like, let's say we don't do a filter anymore. Remove the filter, right? So now let's say instead we want to do like a limit. That's a little tricky because, what you have to do is do another calculated field. Let's clear this. Can I get out of this? Sorry, I'm just not so familiar with this. Let's go here again. So what you have to do is another calculated field. The reading walks you through it where you use, let me exit. There we go. So you have to do another calculated field where what we'll do is we'll create, let's call this the index. And now the function that we'll use is the index function. And what that does is basically like an index of a list. So now you can create another filter. So I think that will be under data analysis filters. And let's say I would have liked to show the filter card and then filtered by index. This is not my favorite. Again, the reading will walk you through this. I forget if I have to move this over. I don't feel like debugging it in front of you. Yeah, let me give up. All right, so in order to do a limit, you have to do 2 steps, one of which I remember. The first one is you have to create an index, all right? And the index just gives you the numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then let me drag it over here. Let's drag the filter to the index card. There it is. And now you can say, okay, I only want to give the first 5 values, okay? So this is effectively your limit, right? So what I did was I right-clicked down here, created the calculated field, specified this is going to be like the index, and then use the index function. Then from there, I finally found this filters tab, and I dragged the index over to filters, okay? And then, I was able to double clicked and said, okay, I only want, basically a limit up to the first 5 values, okay? So those are the main, things. The readings take you through further and also has you, interact with it so that you start to feel comfortable. But that will get you to some pretty good graphs. And then the readings also take you through scatter plots and get you started. So I really think so much of Tableau is just playing around with it. And kind of the point of this